Maria Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished mopping the last office floor at the downtown building. It was nearly midnight, and her feet ached from standing for 12 straight hours. She worked 3 cleaning jobs to make ends meet, supporting her 8-year-old daughter Emma on her own since her husband left 2 years ago. The rain pounded against the windows as Maria gathered her supplies. She had been working at this particular office building for 6 months, always arriving after the business workers went home. The pay was decent, and the night supervisor was kind enough to let her bring Emma along during school holidays when she couldn't afford a babysitter. As she prepared to leave through the back entrance, Maria heard someone coughing near the building's side alley. She paused, listening carefully. The sound came again, followed by what sounded like chattering teeth. Against her better judgment, she decided to investigate. In the narrow alley between 2 buildings, she found a man in his 30s sitting on a piece of cardboard, soaked to the bone. His expensive-looking suit was torn and dirty, and his leather shoes had holes in them. He looked up at her with tired, desperate eyes. "Are you okay?" Maria asked, pulling her jacket tighter against the cold wind. The man tried to stand but stumbled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone. I was just trying to stay dry." Maria noticed he spoke well, with good grammar and a gentle voice. Something about him seemed different from the usual homeless people she sometimes encountered. There was a sadness in his eyes that went beyond just being cold and wet. "How long have you been out here?" she asked, stepping closer despite her, in her voice telling her to be careful. 3 days, he replied quietly. "I lost my apartment, my job, everything. I've been trying to find shelter, but the homeless shelters are full." Maria looked at this stranger and saw something familiar in his eyes. It was the same look of desperation she had worn when her husband left, when she faced the possibility of losing their small apartment, the same fear she felt when Emma asked why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. The rain was getting heavier and the man was shivering uncontrollably. Maria made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Listen, I don't usually do this, and I probably shouldn't, but I have a small apartment about 10 minutes from here. You can sleep on my couch tonight, get dry, and maybe have some hot soup." The man looked up at her in shock. "I couldn't possibly accept that. You don't even know me." "You're right, I don't," Maria said, surprising herself with her boldness. "But I know what it's like to have nowhere to turn. I know what it feels like when the world seems to have given up on you." She paused, thinking about Emma sleeping peacefully at home with their elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen, who sometimes watched her for free when Maria worked late. "My name is Maria," she said, extending her hand. "David," he replied, shaking her hand with his cold, wet fingers. "David Thompson. And I promise you I'm not dangerous. I'm just lost." There was something in the way he said his name, something that suggested he wasn't used to introducing himself so simply. But Maria didn't press for details. Everyone deserved privacy, especially when they were at their lowest point. As they walked through the empty streets toward her apartment building, Maria wondered what she was doing. She had Emma to think about, and letting a stranger into their home went against every safety rule she knew. But something deep inside her told her this was the right thing to do. David walked quietly beside her, occasionally glancing at her with gratitude and disbelief. He couldn't understand why this woman, who clearly worked hard for very little, would offer help to someone she'd never met. When they reached the old apartment building, Maria quietly led him up 3 flights of stairs to her small 2-bedroom unit. The hallway smelled like cooking spices and old carpet, and the paint was peeling in several places. "It's not much," Maria whispered as she unlocked her door, "but it's warm and dry." As they entered, David was struck by how clean and organized everything was, despite the clearly limited resources. There were Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, a small but tidy living room with a couch that had seen better days, and the warm smell of the dinner Maria had prepared earlier for her daughter. "The bathroom is there if you want to clean up," Maria said, pointing down the short hallway. "I'll find you some dry clothes and make you something hot to eat." David stood in the middle of the small living room, overwhelmed by this stranger's kindness. He had spent the last 3 days feeling like the world had forgotten he existed. And now this hard-working woman was treating him with more compassion than he had received from people who had known him for years. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why are you helping me?" Maria turned from the kitchen where she was already heating up leftover soup. "Because someone helped me once when I needed it most," she said. "Because I believe people deserve second chances, and because tomorrow I might be the one who needs help." Neither of them could have imagined that this simple act of kindness would soon reveal a truth that would transform both of their lives in ways they never thought possible. The next morning, Maria woke up to the smell of coffee brewing and something delicious cooking in her kitchen. For a moment, she panicked, forgetting about the stranger she had brought home. Then she remembered David and quickly checked on Emma, who was still sleeping peacefully in her bed. When Maria entered the kitchen, she found David standing at her old stove, wearing the oversized clothes she had given him the night before. He had somehow transformed her meager groceries into what looked like a restaurant-quality breakfast. "I hope you don't mind," David said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to do something to thank you. I found some eggs, a bit of cheese, and some herbs you had growing on the windowsill." Maria stared at the perfectly prepared omelet, fresh coffee, and neatly arranged table. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" David hesitated for a moment. "I used to cook a lot back when—" He trailed off, then smiled sadly. "Let's just say I had more time and better ingredients to work with." Just then Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. She looked curiously at the stranger in their kitchen. "Mama, who is this man?" "This is Mr. David, sweetheart. He needed a place to stay last night because of the storm." Emma studied David with the direct, unfiltered gaze that only children possess. "Are you homeless?" "Emma," Maria scolded gently, but David held up his hand. "It's okay," he said, crouching down to Emma's level. "Yes, I am homeless right now. Your mama was very kind to help me." "That's sad," Emma said matter-of-factly. "But Mama always says we should help people when they're sad. Do you like pancakes? Mama makes really good pancakes on Saturdays." David's eyes misted over slightly at the child's innocent acceptance and kindness. "I love pancakes. Maybe I could help make them sometime." Over breakfast, David learned more about Maria's life. She worked 3 jobs: the office cleaning at night, housekeeping at a hotel in the mornings, and weekend shifts at a local diner. Emma was in 3rd grade and wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. They had been on their own for 2 years, and Maria was proud that they had never missed a rent payment, though she admitted it was sometimes close. In return, David shared carefully selected pieces of his story. He had worked in business, he said, but had made some bad decisions and trusted the wrong people. He had lost his job and his savings, and with no family to turn to, he had quickly found himself on the streets. What he didn't tell them was that, until a week ago, he had been the vice president of operations at a major corporation, earning more in a month than Maria made in a year. He didn't mention that his downfall came when he discovered his business partner was embezzling funds, and when David tried to expose him, he found himself framed for the very crimes he had tried to prevent. The company fired him, his assets were frozen during the investigation, and his so-called friends disappeared overnight. He especially didn't tell them that in 2 days, he had an interview for a position as CEO of Martinez Holdings, one of the largest companies in the state. The interview had been arranged by his lawyer, who believed David's name would be cleared soon, and that this new opportunity could be his chance to rebuild his career and reputation. After breakfast, Maria prepared to leave for her hotel job. "You're welcome to stay here today," she told David. "I'll be back around 4. Emma has school, so Mrs. Chen from next door will pick her up and keep her until I get home." David was overwhelmed by her continued trust. "Are you sure? You barely know me." "I'm sure," Maria said simply. "But I do have one request. There's a leaky faucet in the bathroom that I haven't been able to afford to fix. If you're handy with repairs, I'll take care of it," David promised. After Maria and Emma left, David spent the day not only fixing the faucet, but also repairing several other small issues around the apartment that Maria had been dealing with. He tightened loose cabinet handles, unclogged a drain, and even managed to get the temperamental heater working more efficiently. But more than the physical repairs, David spent time thinking about what he had witnessed. Maria worked incredibly hard just to provide basic necessities for her daughter. Her clothes were clean but old, her furniture was worn but well maintained, and every penny was clearly accounted for. Yet she had offered her help to a complete stranger without hesitation. In the business world he came from, David had been surrounded by people who calculated the benefit of every action, who networked and socialized with purpose. Maria's genuine kindness, given freely with no expectation of return, was something he hadn't experienced in years. When Emma came home from school that afternoon, she found David sitting at their small kitchen table, helping her with homework that Mrs. Chen said she was struggling with. "You're really smart," Emma observed as David patiently explained a math problem. "Are you a teacher?" "No, but I've learned a lot over the years," David replied. "What's your favorite subject?" "Reading," Emma said without hesitation. "But we don't have very many books at home. Mama says books are expensive." That evening, when Maria returned from work, she found her apartment transformed. Not only were the repairs completed, but David had somehow managed to reorganize her small space to make it feel larger and more functional. Emma was at the table, working enthusiastically on homework with David's help. "How was your day?" Maria asked, still amazed at how comfortable this stranger seemed in their home. "Productive," David said, "and enlightening. You have an amazing daughter, Maria. She's smart and kind, just like her mother." That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Maria and David sat in the living room talking. David found himself sharing more than he had intended about his past, though he still kept the specific details vague. "I used to think success meant having the biggest office, the most expensive car, the most impressive title," he said. "But watching you today, seeing how you've built a real life, a real home, with so little, I think I had it all wrong." Maria smiled. "I don't have much choice. When Emma's father left, I had to figure out how to survive. You do what you have to do." "No," David said seriously. "You do much more than that. You do it with grace, with kindness, with dignity. That's not survival, Maria, that's strength." As David lay on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling of the small apartment, he made a decision. Tomorrow he would go to his interview, and if he got the job, he would find a way to repay the kindness he had been shown. He had no idea yet how dramatically his life was about to change, or how his presence in Maria's life would soon reveal a connection that neither of them could have ever imagined. On the third morning, David woke up early and quietly prepared breakfast for Maria and Emma. He had spent half the night thinking about his upcoming interview, and he knew he needed to tell Maria something, even if he couldn't tell her everything. "I have an important meeting today," he said as Maria got ready for work. "A job interview, actually." Maria's face lit up with genuine happiness. "That's wonderful. I'm so glad things are looking up for you. The thing is," David continued carefully, "if I get this job, it might mean I can start getting back on my feet. But I want you to know that meeting you and Emma has meant more to me than you could possibly understand." Emma, who was eating the pancakes David had made, looked up seriously. "If you get a job, does that mean you won't be homeless anymore?" "That's right," David said. "Good," Emma declared. "Everyone should have a home." David borrowed Maria's iron to press the one decent shirt he owned, and Maria surprised him by producing a tie that had belonged to Emma's father. "I kept a few things," she said simply. "You might as well put them to good use." As David prepared to leave for his interview, he felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about getting a job anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could rebuild his life with the same kind of integrity and strength that Maria showed every day. The interview was at Martinez Holdings, a company David knew well by reputation. They were known for treating their employees fairly and giving back to the community. When he arrived at the impressive downtown headquarters, he felt the familiar sensation of returning to the corporate world he had once navigated so easily. The interview panel consisted of 3 board members, including the company founder's daughter, Isabella Martinez, who now served as the board chairwoman. David had researched the company thoroughly and knew that old Mr. Martinez had built his empire from nothing, starting with a small grocery store and expanding into real estate, manufacturing, and retail. Mr. Thompson, Isabella began, your resume is impressive, despite the recent difficulties. But we're not just looking for someone with business experience. We're looking for someone who understands what it means to struggle, someone who remembers where they came from. David thought of Maria, working 3 jobs to support her daughter, never complaining, never losing her kindness despite her challenges. I do understand struggle, he said quietly, more now than ever before. The interview went well. David found himself speaking passionately about ethical business practices, about the importance of treating employees as people rather than just resources, about creating opportunities for those who needed them most. When they asked about his vision for the company, he talked about building bridges between corporate success and community support. We'll be making our decision by the end of the week, Isabella told him as the interview concluded. But I have to say, Mr. Thompson, you're not quite what I expected. In what way? You seem different from most corporate executives. More grounded somehow. Less focused on personal gain and more interested in doing the right thing. David smiled. I've had some excellent teachers recently about what really matters in life. When David returned to Maria's apartment that afternoon, he found Emma home from school, working on a project about community helpers. How did your interview go? Emma asked immediately. I think it went well, David said. But we'll have to wait and see. What kind of job was it? David hesitated. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that he had just interviewed to run a company worth billions of dollars? It's a business job, he said finally. If I get it, I would help make decisions about how to run a big company. Like a boss? Something like that. That evening, Maria came home to find David helping Emma with her community helpers project. They had created a poster showing different jobs, and Emma had drawn a picture of her mother with the caption, My mom works 3 jobs to take care of me. She wanted to include you too, Emma told David, showing him a drawing of a man in a suit. I drew you as a businessman because that's what you're going to be. Maria looked at the drawing and then at David. You really think you'll get this job? I hope so, David said. But Maria, I need you to know something. If I do get this position, it might be bigger than I initially let on. Before Maria could ask what he meant, there was a knock at the door. Maria opened it to find Mrs. Chen looking excited and holding a newspaper. Maria, you'll never believe this, the older woman said, bustling into the apartment. Look at this article in today's business section. She spread the newspaper on the kitchen table, pointing to a headline that read, Martinez Holdings seeks new CEO to lead companies next. Chapter. My nephew works at their corporate office, Mrs. Chen continued. He says they're looking for someone special, someone who really understands people. The company does so much good work in the community. They helped fund Emma's school's new library. You know, David felt his heart sink as he saw Maria reading the article. The accompanying photo showed Isabella Martinez and several board members, and the article mentioned that they were looking for a leader who could balance profit with social responsibility. It would be amazing to work for a company like that, Maria said wistfully. They seem to actually care about people. Emma looked up from her homework. Mr. David, is that the company you interviewed with? The room fell silent. Maria looked from Emma to David, her expression changing as understanding began to dawn. David? She said quietly. What exactly was this job interview for? David took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than he had expected. I interviewed to be the CEO of Martinez Holdings, he said quietly. Maria stared at him, the newspaper still in her hands. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened in surprise. The CEO? Maria whispered. But that would make you one of the most powerful business leaders in the state, David finished. Yes. Emma looked confused. What's a CEO? It's like being the boss of all the bosses, Mrs. Chen explained. still staring at David in amazement. Maria sat down heavily in her chair, looking at this man she had taken in off the streets just 3 days ago. The man who had been sleeping on her couch, eating her food, playing with her daughter. "I don't understand," she said. "If you could get a job like that, how were you homeless? How did you end up in that alley?" David knew that this conversation would change everything between them, and he wasn't sure if it would be for better or worse. But Maria deserved the truth, all of it. "That," he said, "is a long story, and one I think I owe you completely." As Emma continued working on her homework, oblivious to the tension in the room, David prepared to reveal the full truth about who he really was and how he had ended up in that alley 3 nights ago. He had no idea that his confession would lead to a discovery that would shock them both and change their lives forever. After Mrs. Chen left, promising to keep David's secret, Maria put Emma to bed early, telling her daughter that the adults needed to talk. Once Emma was settled, Maria returned to the living room where David sat waiting, looking more nervous than he had during his CEO interview. "I need to tell you everything," David began. "My full name is David Alexander Thompson. Until 2 weeks ago, I was the vice president of operations at Hartwell Industries, making more money in a month than most people see in a year." Maria sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, listening without interruption. "I discovered that my business partner and best friend, someone I had trusted completely, was stealing from the company, not just small amounts but millions of dollars over several years. When I confronted him with evidence, he claimed I was the one embezzling the money." David's voice grew heavy with the memory. He had covered his tracks well, made it look like I was the guilty one. "Within days I was fired, my assets were frozen, and I was facing criminal charges. My lawyers said the investigation could take months, and even though they believed I would be cleared eventually, I had no access to my money, no job, and suddenly no friends." "What about family?" Maria asked quietly. "My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. No siblings, no relatives I was close to. I had built my entire life around my career and the people in my business circle. When that disappeared, I had nothing and no one." Maria tried to process this information. The man sitting on her couch who had fixed her faucet and helped her daughter with homework had been a millionaire just 2 weeks ago. The apartment I was renting was expensive, and without income, I couldn't pay the rent. I had some savings in a personal account, but it ran out quickly. I was too proud to ask the few acquaintances I had for help, and honestly, most of them had already decided I was guilty anyway. David looked around Maria's small, tidy apartment. 3 days ago, I spent my last $20 on food. I had been staying in cheap motels, but I couldn't afford even that anymore. That's how I ended up in that alley." "And the CEO position?" "My lawyer called me yesterday morning. He said the investigation was moving quickly and that new evidence had emerged proving my innocence. He had reached out to his contacts and arranged the interview with Martinez Holdings. He thought a fresh start with a reputable company would help rebuild my reputation." Maria was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything David had told her. Finally, she spoke. "So you went from being a millionaire to being homeless to potentially becoming one of the most powerful businessmen in the state, all in the span of 2 weeks? It sounds crazy when you put it like that, but yes. And through it all, you never once acted entitled or demanding. You cooked, you cleaned, you helped Emma with her homework. You treated us with respect and kindness." David met her eyes. "Maria, these past 3 days have been the most real, the most meaningful days I've had in years. In my old life, I was surrounded by people who wanted something from me, who valued me for what I could give them or do for them. You and Emma helped me simply because I needed help. No agenda, no strings attached." Maria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she had found David just 3 nights ago. "Do you think you'll get the job?" "I don't know. But Maria, if I do, I want you to know that I'll never forget what you've done for me. I want to help you and Emma in return. We don't need charity, David. It wouldn't be charity. It would be gratitude." The next morning brought unexpected news. David's lawyer called early, his voice excited. "David, the case against you has been dropped." We found the smoking gun. Your former partner had been sloppy with one of his offshore accounts, and we traced everything back to him. The FBI arrested him this morning, and all charges against you have been officially dismissed. David felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. There's more, his lawyer continued. Your former company wants to offer you a settlement for wrongful termination. It's a substantial amount. After the call, David shared the news with Maria and Emma over breakfast. Does this mean you're not in trouble anymore? Emma asked. That's right, I'm completely cleared of any wrongdoing. Good, Emma said firmly. I knew you weren't a bad person. Bad people don't help with homework. That afternoon, David received a call from Isabella Martinez herself. Mr. Thompson, we've made our decision. We'd like to offer you the position of CEO with a start date of next Monday, but I have to ask, where have you been staying during this difficult time? Our background check showed your last known address was foreclosed. David looked around Maria's small apartment, where he had found more warmth and acceptance than in any mansion or penthouse he had ever visited. I've been staying with friends, he said simply. Very good friends who helped me when I needed it most. After accepting the position, David sat with Maria and Emma to discuss what would happen next. I'll need to find my own place, he said. And I want to do something for you and Emma, not because I feel obligated, but because I care about both of you. David, you don't owe us anything, Maria insisted. Maybe not, but you've given me something invaluable. You've reminded me what real kindness looks like, what genuine community feels like. You've shown me that success isn't just about money or power. It's about the connections we make and the ways we help each other. Emma looked up from her coloring book. Mr. David, when you're the CEO, will you still visit us? David smiled. If your mom says it's okay, I'd like to visit you as much as possible. Maybe I could still help you with your homework sometimes. I'd like that, Emma said seriously. You're a good teacher. That evening, as they sat down for dinner together, one last time before David moved on to his new life, none of them could have predicted the incredible discovery that was waiting just around the corner. A discovery that would reveal that their meeting had been far more than just a chance encounter between a homeless man and a kind stranger. The threads of their past were about to weave together in a way that would shock them all and prove that sometimes fate has a plan far more intricate than anyone could imagine. David's first day as CEO of Martinez Holdings was overwhelming in the best possible way. The company's headquarters buzzed with positive energy, and he quickly understood why it had such a good reputation. Employees seemed genuinely happy, and there was a culture of respect and collaboration that he had rarely seen in corporate environments. During his orientation, Isabella Martinez took him on a tour of the company's various divisions. They stopped at a wall displaying photographs and stories of the company's community outreach programs. This is really the heart of what we do, Isabella explained. My father always believed that businesses should give back to the communities that support them. We fund scholarships, support local schools, help single parents get job training, and provide emergency assistance to families in crisis. David studied the photos with interest. One section was dedicated to their Second Chances program, which helped people who had faced setbacks get back on their feet. We've helped over 3,000 families in the past 5 years, Isabella continued proudly. My father used to say that you never know when someone you help might turn out to be extraordinary. He believed in investing in people, not just profits. As they continued the tour, David found himself thinking about Maria. She embodied everything this company seemed to value: hard work, integrity, kindness, and resilience. He made a mental note to find ways to expand their community programs. Meanwhile, across town, Maria was having an unusual day of her own. During her lunch break at the hotel, her supervisor approached her with an envelope. Maria, this came for you today. It's from Martinez Holdings. Isn't that the big company downtown? Maria's heart skipped. She hadn't told anyone at work about David or his new position. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers and found a formal letter on company letterhead. Dear Ms. Martinez. The letter read, We have reviewed your employment history and qualifications, and we would like to invite you to interview for a position in our hospitality management training program. This program is designed for hardworking individuals who demonstrate leadership potential and community values. Please call the number below to schedule an interview. Maria read the letter 3 times. She had never applied for a job at Martinez Holdings. How did they even know she existed? That evening, when David called to check on Emma's homework progress, Maria mentioned the mysterious letter. "Maria, I swear I didn't send that letter or ask anyone to contact you," David said sincerely. "I would have talked to you first before doing anything like that. Then how did they get my name? I honestly don't know, but Martinez Holdings is known for actively seeking out good employees. Maybe one of your supervisors recommended you, or perhaps they noticed your work ethic at one of the buildings you clean." The next day, Maria decided to take a chance and go to the interview. She arranged for Mrs. Chen to pick up Emma from school and borrowed a professional outfit from a co-worker. The Martinez Holdings building was even more impressive up close. Maria felt intimidated as she rode the elevator to the 15th floor, but she reminded herself of all the challenges she had already overcome. The interview was conducted by the Human Resources Director, a warm woman named Patricia Rodriguez, and surprisingly, Isabella Martinez herself. "Ms. Martinez," Isabella began with a smile, "I have to tell you, your background is quite impressive. 3 jobs, never missed a day of work in 2 years, excellent references from all your employers, and you're raising a daughter on your own." "Thank you," Maria replied, still puzzled about how they knew all this information. "What's particularly interesting," Patricia added, "is that several people mentioned your character in their recommendations. Your night supervisor at the downtown office building said you once stayed late to help a new employee who was struggling. Your hotel manager said you found a guest's lost wedding ring and went to great lengths to return it." "I just did what anyone would do," Maria said modestly. "Actually," Isabella said gently, "most people wouldn't. That's what makes you special." The interview continued for an hour, covering Maria's goals, her experience managing difficult situations, and her ideas for customer service excellence. Maria found herself relaxing as she talked about her work and her hopes for Emma's future. "There's one more thing I'd like to discuss," Isabella said near the end of the interview. "Our founder, my father, always said that the best employees are those who help others without expecting anything in return. Can you tell me about a time when you helped someone, even though it was difficult or risky for you?" Maria thought immediately of David, shivering in that alley 3 nights ago, but she had promised to keep his situation private. "Well," she said carefully, "recently I helped someone who was in a very difficult situation. They had nowhere to go, and it was raining. I offered them shelter, even though I didn't know them, and it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do from a safety perspective." "What made you decide to help them?" "I remembered what it felt like when I was struggling after my husband left. I remembered how desperate and alone I felt. I couldn't walk past someone else who might be feeling the same way." Isabella and Patricia exchanged a meaningful look. "What happened to this person?" Isabella asked. "They got back on their feet. Found a good job, actually. A really good job." "I'm glad it worked out well," Isabella said warmly. "Ms. Martinez, we'd like to offer you a position in our management training program. It would mean better hours, better pay, and the opportunity to advance into a leadership role. You'd also receive full benefits, including health insurance and a college fund that you could use for Emma's education." Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. I accept. Thank you so much." After Maria left, Isabella turned to Patricia. "Make sure to add a note to her file about the person she helped. I have a feeling that story is going to become very relevant soon." That evening, Maria called David to share her incredible news. "They offered me the job, David. I'm going to be in their management training program." "Maria, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. You deserve every opportunity that comes your way. I still can't figure out how they found me, but I'm not going to question it. This could change everything for Emma and me. Sometimes the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time," David said thoughtfully. Neither of them realized how prophetic those words would prove to be. or that the universe had been orchestrating their connection long before they ever met in that rainy alley. The next week, as Maria began her new job and David settled into his role as CEO, a routine background check would reveal a connection between them that would explain not only Maria's mysterious job offer, but also illuminate a family history that had been hidden for over 20 years. The truth was about to surface, and it would prove that their meeting had been destiny, not coincidence. 2 weeks into their new positions, David was reviewing employee files when he came across something that made his blood run cold. As part of his executive responsibilities, he had access to all personnel records, including the detailed background checks that the company conducted on new hires. Maria's file was comprehensive as expected for someone entering their management program. But buried in the family history section was information that David never expected to see. Maria Elena Martinez, born in San Antonio, Texas. Father, Roberto Martinez. Mother, Carmen Santos. Martinez, deceased. David's hands trembled as he read further. Roberto Martinez had worked for Martinez Holdings until his death in a car accident 23 years ago. He had been the company founder's younger brother. The room seemed to spin as David processed this information. Maria wasn't just any employee. She was family. She was the daughter of the company founder's brother, the niece of the man whose company David now ran. But there was more. According to the file, Roberto Martinez had left the company and moved to San Antonio after a family disagreement in the early 1980s. He had died when Maria was only 7 years old, and her mother had passed away 5 years later. Maria had been raised by her maternal grandmother until she aged out of the foster system at 18. David immediately called Isabella Martinez and asked her to come to his office urgently. "Isabella, I need to ask you about something sensitive," David began when she arrived. "Do you know Maria Martinez, our new management trainee?" Isabella's expression grew thoughtful. "Yes, of course. Lovely woman, single mother, very hardworking. Why do you ask?" "According to her background check, her father was Roberto Martinez, your father's brother." Isabella went pale. She sat down heavily in the chair across from David's desk. "Roberto," she whispered. "I haven't heard that name in 20 years. You knew him?" "He was my uncle, but he and my father had a terrible falling out when I was young. Roberto wanted the company to expand faster, take bigger risks. My father was more conservative, more focused on steady growth and taking care of employees. They fought constantly until Roberto finally left to start his own business in Texas." Isabella looked up at David with tears in her eyes. "My father regretted that fight until the day he died. He tried to reach out to Roberto several times, but Roberto was too proud to reconcile. When we heard Roberto had died, my father was devastated. He tried to find Roberto's family to offer help, but they had disappeared. We assumed Roberto's wife had taken their daughter and moved away." "She did, in a sense," David said gently. "Maria's mother died when she was 12. Maria went into foster care. She's been on her own ever since." Isabella covered her face with her hands. "All these years our family has been here, successful, privileged, and Roberto's daughter has been struggling, working 3 jobs just to survive." "There's something else you need to know," David said. "Maria is the woman who helped me when I was homeless. She's the one who took me in, fed me, gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go." Isabella looked up sharply. "The woman you mentioned in your interview? The one who showed you what real kindness looks like?" "Yes. Maria saved my life, Isabella. And she had no idea who I was, just like she has no idea who she is, who her family really is." Isabella stood up and began pacing. "We have to tell her. She deserves to know." "I agree, but we need to be careful about how we do this. Maria is proud. She won't want to feel like she's been given opportunities because of her family connection." "But David, don't you see? She wasn't given opportunities because of her family. She earned them. We found her because our human resources department actively seeks out excellent employees. Her supervisors recommended her because of her character and work ethic. The family connection is just fate." That evening, David visited Maria and Emma as he had been doing regularly since starting his new job. Maria was excited about her training program, and Emma was thrilled to show David her latest school project. "Maria," David said carefully after. Emma had gone to bed. "I need to talk to you about something important, something I discovered at work today." "Is everything okay? Am I doing something wrong in the training program?" "No, you're doing beautifully. This is about something else entirely." David took a deep breath. "Maria, what do you remember about your father?" Maria looked surprised by the question. "Not much. I was only 7 when he died. I remember he was always working, always busy. He traveled a lot for business." "Why do you ask? Do you remember what kind of business he was in?" "Something with companies, I think. My mother used to say he was involved with a big corporation, but she didn't like to talk about it much after he died. She said it brought back painful memories." David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photograph that Isabella had given him earlier. It was from the company archives taken at a company picnic in 1982. It showed the Martinez family together: the founder, his wife, their children, and Roberto with his young wife Carmen, and a little girl with dark curls. "Maria, I think this little girl is you." Maria took the photograph with shaking hands. She stared at it for a long moment, and David could see recognition dawning in her eyes. "That's my father," she whispered. "And my mother. But I don't understand. Where did you get this picture?" "Maria, your father was Roberto Martinez. He was the brother of the man who founded Martinez Holdings. Isabella Martinez is your cousin." Maria stared at David in shock. "That's impossible." "It's not only possible, it's true. Your father worked for the company until he left after a disagreement with his brother. That's why your family moved to Texas, why you ended up in foster care when your mother died. The Martinez family has been looking for you for over 20 years. Tears began streaming down Maria's face. "You're telling me that all this time, while I was struggling, while I was working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over Emma's head, I had family?" "Yes. And Maria, they want to make things right. But more importantly, you need to know that none of this changes anything about why you were hired, or why you deserve every opportunity you're being given. You earned your position based on your own merit." Maria sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, she looked up at David. "How is this possible? How did a homeless man I found in an alley turn out to be the CEO of my family's company? How did we find each other?" David smiled gently. "I've been asking myself the same question. Maybe some things are just meant to be." The next day, Isabella came to meet Maria personally. The reunion between the two women was emotional and healing. Isabella showed Maria photos of her father, told her stories about the family she had never known, and explained how the rift had torn the family apart. "Your father was a good man," Isabella told Maria. "He and my father were both stubborn, but they loved each other deeply. My father never stopped regretting their fight." "What happens now?" Maria asked. "Now you get to decide," Isabella said. "Your family, Maria. You always have been. You have a place here, not just as an employee, but as a Martinez. But I want you to know that whatever you choose, we'll support you." Over the following weeks, Maria gradually got to know her extended family. She learned about her heritage, about the company her father had helped build, about the legacy she was now part of. Emma was fascinated by suddenly having a large family, including cousins her own age and relatives who were eager to spoil her with the love and attention she had never received. David continued to visit regularly, and his friendship with Maria deepened into something more meaningful. They had been through an extraordinary experience together, and the bond they had formed was unbreakable. 6 months later, at the company's annual charity gala, David took the microphone to address the gathered employees, community leaders, and philanthropists. "Ladies and gentlemen, when I became CEO of Martinez Holdings, I thought I understood what this company stood for. I thought I knew what it meant to serve our community and support our employees. But I was wrong. I had no idea." He looked out at the audience, finding Maria's face in the crowd. "6 months ago, I learned what real kindness looks like from a Single mother who worked 3 jobs and still found room in her heart and her home for a stranger in need. That woman taught me that success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. She showed me that strength isn't about power over others, but about lifting others up. David paused, emotion evident in his voice. That woman, Maria Martinez, is now part of our management team, and I'm proud to say she's also become part of my life. She embodies everything this company stands for, and she's living proof that when we invest in people, when we believe in second chances, when we lead with compassion, extraordinary things can happen. The audience erupted in applause as Maria, blushing but radiant, stood to acknowledge their recognition. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, David found Maria on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Quite a journey from that, Allie, 6 months ago," he said, joining her at the railing. "I still can't believe it sometimes," Maria replied. "6 months ago I was just trying to survive. Now Emma has a college fund. I have a career I love. And I've found a family I never knew existed." Maria looked at him, her eyes sparkling. "And I found you. The man who taught my daughter that kindness matters, who showed me that it's possible to be successful without losing you."